Right, how are we doing? We're going to look at lighting in Blender Render. So this is going to be specifically about Blender's internal render engine. We're not going to be talking about cycles. Lamps in cycles work in a completely different way. Lighting in general actually works completely differently in cycles. Lamps actually only really apply to Blender Render. So I think most of you are using Blender Render. We're going to stick with that for the time being. So I've got a little table here just to kind of go through the different types of lights. So we've got all the lamps down here. We've got a kind of general description of the effect and then a real world example on the right hand side here. So we'll start off with the point lights. This is the light that you will have when you first start Blender up. It is simulating a light bulb, so it's even in all directions. It's emanating light in all directions from this source. We have a spotlight which does have direction. We can point it at things, so it's a little bit like a spotlight, funnily enough. So we can actually shine a light down into our scene, create a little pool of light on the ground, and cast shadows and place our objects in that scene. So that's quite nice. We'll have a look at the settings of the spotlight in a second. We have area lights, which are simulating light coming from a shape. So a little bit like you might be useful for those of you who've got your televisions, where we can have light coming from a shape, from a rectangle or a square. It's good for windows also. So you would have your area lamps set up in this area here, simulating light coming from the shape of the TV screen. Hemi lights are the odd one out, as they have no shadows. They cast no shadows. They are simulating the sort of light you would get on a cloudy day. When you have clouds in the sky, the clouds diffuse the light coming from the sun, and you tend not to get shadows on days like that. So it's a very soft light that casts no shadows, and it's coming from a distance. And then we also have sun lamps, which do have direction, so you can point them at things, but it's even in all directions. The light is even across your whole scene. So you can have a sun that is actually pointing at things and casting a shadow in that direction. But the rest of your scene will be lit evenly. So we can move them around and point them at stuff, but the rest of the light will be even. So we can cast shadows in particular directions, but your whole scene is going to be very well lit with a sun lamp. Right, so that's basically enough of that. That's the 5 lamps in a nutshell. Let's get rid of Photoshop and come back to Blender. I'm going to quit Photoshop while I'm at it, actually, not hide, quit. And let's get into Blender. So we've got our default scene here. I'm just going to chuck a ground plane down and make it relatively large. And by default we have our camera and our lamp. So let's have a look at some of the settings. Just as a reminder, we are in Blender Render. We're not going to be looking at cycles here, as lighting is completely different in cycles. So to start off with, let's just make sure that these, I'm not going to be doing an awful lot of hotkey business, but let's split our screen in half. So this is a very useful thing to do when we are previewing the lighting in our scene. We can have this 3D view set to rendered, so the viewport shading option here will give us a preview of how our scene is rendering with the lights that we have, and then over here in the object shading mode we can control that light and move it around and see the effects happening on the left here in real time. So let's just move that cube up a little bit higher and pull out our properties window. So the settings here in the properties window, remember, are context specific, so while I've got the cube selected I can't see any lighting information. We need to have that lamp selected and we can see the little lamp icon here. It's the same lamp icon that's up in the outline now, the little circle with the arrows coming from it. So when we select that, we can have a look at some of the settings. So when you first start Blender, you will have a point lamp in your scene. let's have a look at some of the settings that we have on that. So we have colour. All the lamps available to us have the capacity to change colour. So we can set the colour. Now this is actually very useful, very helpful, as we need to demonstrate that we are enhancing meaning in our projects using post-production techniques. I'm going to class lighting really as a post-production effect, although we will be doing it in the production process. So it's really important in the distinction criteria that you are enhancing meaning. So this is the use of light to create mood, atmosphere, or just to fit with a genre. We all know about blue lights and the kind of indication of genre. So we have the energy. I'm just going to put that back to white for now, because it's going to be distracting. Energy here. This is the starting energy of the lamp. Pretty straightforward. You turn that up, you're going to get a brighter lamp. The fall off is how quickly the light falls off, how quickly it moves from the light area in your scene to the darkness. We can play with some presets here and have a look at the difference. So this has a larger distance, a larger fall off, or we can manually adjust the distance of that fall off here. So useful settings to control our light. We have the option here to switch off shadow. I wouldn't recommend that. There is a specific mention of how your shadows are interacting with the scene. So if you don't have any shadows, you're not going to get, I think that's part of the merit criteria for the environment unit. You must have shadows switched on. So make sure you've got ray shadow switched on. We'll keep that open. Sampling is the quality here of the kind of gradient effect that's being created, moving from light to dark. So if we turn that off, we'll get a better quality gradient here, but it will take longer to render. The soft size is how soft the edges of these shadows that are being cast are. So while I think it only really works when we've got higher than one samples. One is very low. I wouldn't go too crazy. The max is 64, I think, and that's going to really start to slow your computer down. But with 10 samples, we can see the effects that the adjusting the soft size has. So we get a softer shadow. I'll just put that up to something a bit higher so you can really see the effect. So now we've got this really soft edge on that shadow. So that's very nice. Let's have a look at our sun lamp. So the sun lamp, as you can see now, is casting a shadow from the direction. The direction is indicated here by the yellow dots. So if I want the shadow to be cast in this direction, I would need to rotate this lamp. So I would need to, looks like I'm going to have to rotate it on the Z axis. I can hit R and Z and spin it round to aim it at my, nope, I need to move into a better position. Let's spin it round on the Z axis. R and Z, spin it right round, point it, and now the shadow will be on this side of the cube. So it has direction, but you can see how even the light is across the scene. Energy settings, we're not going to look at sky and atmosphere. Same deal. Soft shadow, soft edges in the shadow, samples, and turning the shadow off. The spotlight is pretty nice if you're looking for that spotlight effect. That's not really illuminating my cube particularly well. Maybe I need to move it up and over and back a little bit. There we go. So that's lighting up my cube quite nicely. So same deal, fall off, energy, colour, switching shadows off, and sampling, soft size. We also have shape. So with the spotlight we can adjust its size. So if we want a smaller spot, we can turn this right down and we've got a smaller spotlight. The blend is how soft the blend is between the pool of light and the darkness around it. So if we turn that up, you'll get a lovely soft edge to your light there. Let's come in a bit closer. Check that out. Okay. What is quite nice is this halo option. So you'll get that sort of simulation of light coming through atmosphere, coming through smoke. We can turn the intensity down. One is a little bit too dense there, so turning that down will give you a slightly more realistic look, I think. Even turning it down as low as that. There we go. That's pretty nice. You might find that if the light isn't reaching the ground, then this distance here is affecting that. So if you've got your distance set too low, it might not reach the ground. What else isn't that? Yeah, we can change the shape. So changing that spotlight to a square will give you a sort of approximation of light coming through a window. Hemi-lights. So hemi-lights, even sun on a cloudy day. So we're not getting any really harsh shadows, and it's not casting any shadows either. Useful for turntable animations and for the fly-through if you're just wanting a neutral, soft light that's not particularly distracting. I would maybe want to turn the energy down even from 1. This is a bit bright, but yeah, I mean it's a little bit washed out. There are other things you could do to improve that. I think possibly going into your world settings and playing with playing with some of these settings might improve the results of that hemi-light. But not particularly useful because we do need to cast shadows. So here's our area light, and that is very bright. Changing the distance will affect how that light is working. Let's take that down to 10. So that's improving the harsh light that area light was giving off. Let's have a look at the area light in the object view. You can sort of see its shape, can you? Yeah, there's its kind of rectangular shape. So it's set as a rectangle, 3 by 1. There it is as a square. So you'd be lining this up with your television screen or your window to create that kind of area effect. This is the kind of closest you will get to how cycles work. In cycles we use materials, so you'll often create a plane and have that emit light. So a little bit like that. Obviously the larger your area lamp, the less cast shadow you're going to get, because the light is going to be so big that it's going to be coming round, bleeding round the edges of your objects and filling up the shadow areas. So a small area is going to cast a sharp shadow. A pin of light will cast a very sharp shadow, whereas larger shadows larger lights will manage to get around your cube. So that's it. I've kind of rushed through a little bit. I hope that's helpful, though. I just would like you to actively experiment now with the different lamps in the same way I have here, just to get a hang of it, and then get straight into your environments and start thinking about how you can enhance the meaning, or at least kind of cement the meaning, get the meaning across with the use of light. I've talked about atmosphere, I've talked and mood, and also just simple things like what time of day is it. Do you want to be casting long shadows, or do you want to have a kind of diffuse situation where you have a more even light source? These things are entirely up to you. This is where you're going to start getting creative, and I really want you to set up the lights in your scene before we start animation. So very important that you take time and set up lights. So have a play with it, and then get into your environments and start setting up lights. You can have more than one. So if you have a in Blender Render, you get really harsh shadows where when the light can't get, so the faces the light can't get to will just go black. So you're going to want to perhaps have a number of lights kind of filling at different degrees of intensity, different colors even, to simulate light reflecting off materials, colored materials, filling in those shadow areas. Okay, so I'll leave it there. I hope that was helpful. It's very simple, very basic. Have a play around.